Podcast. And the atmosphere's growing.
We should have already started recording it. This would be great. Preamble.
Hi there, podcast fans. I'm Tom Gibbs. Welcome to Telegraph Audio Football Club. Today, Liverpool's hopes of reaching a record 18 consecutive wins in the Premier League were dashed by old foes Manchester United in a 1-1 draw at Old Trafford, described as exciting by one of the Audio Football Club team, an opinion not shared by the panel. The bespoke local pressure cooker remains switched on in Tottenham as Spurs fail to beat bottom club Watford, while it's back to business for Manchester City on a weekend which nearly causes us to break our promise to you to never discuss VAR for longer than 1 minute per show. Plus, we unpick several reports of racism from around the UK, there's a banned El Clasico, and how to motivate referees to watch more television. Let's take you now into the audio recording facility where I'm joined as ever by Mina Rizuki. How are you, Mina?
Oh, I always say the term as ever when I introduce as well, and people just always laugh at me for using it.
Well, who are you introducing with as ever?
Usually when I do this.
No, don't mention that. Bleep that, Joel. Beep that. We don't want to hear about any other podcasts. As far as I'm aware, this is the nation's only football podcast.
Well, there are other football podcasts.
I know, JJ Bull. It's a shock, isn't it? How are you? Where have you been?
I was playing football yesterday. We lost heroically 11-2. Yeah.
Did you get on the score sheet?
No, I did get an assist from a corner, and I was heavily involved with some other of the nice play. But we were, to a man, awful.
Good.
Sounds like a Scottish game.
It was Aberdeen versus Everton. That was the game.
Take that. Completing our lineup today. It's the boy wonder, Sam Dean. How are you, Sam?
I'm good. I'm a bit sad because this weekend was the first weekend this season I wore my winter coat at a match.
You've gone early there.
It's
still autumn.
I hoped it would be a mistake, but it wasn't.
Oh.
And I was right to wear it, which makes me realise that the next 4 or 5 months are going to be very cold.
Which match were you at?
Palace, Man City.
Yeah, but that was an evening game. And it was cold in South London on Saturday.
But also, Palace's press box is slightly indoorsy.
Yes.
And I still felt quite cold in the winter coat. So I'm afraid the time has come.
You poor wee scrap.
It's going to be a good 5 months.
It's going to be long.
We'll get on to Palace, but let's start with Manchester United's 1-1 draw with Liverpool. Our Northern football correspondent James Ducker was there for us and has recorded us this match report, seemingly from a building site.
It was an interesting one at Old Trafford on Sunday. Manchester United would undoubtedly have taken a draw before kick-off against Liverpool. Indeed, they were set up like an away team, hoping to keep it tight, to be honest, and perhaps nick a goal. By the end, though, with just 5 minutes of normal time left and leading 1-0, I think they'll have been very disappointed not to hang on and claim that victory. You looked at that United lineup and you really wondered how they could have been left with such a squad after blowing the best part of £850 million in 6 years. But in the absence of genuine senior leaders, it was the youngsters who stepped up to the mark. Daniel James, Marcus Rashford, Scott McTominay, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. They all demonstrate the sort of hunger, the fight, the urgency this fixture demands. But still, the limitations of this United side, clear and obvious. Clear and obvious, I'd say, as the foul by Lindelof on Origi in the lead up to United's goal that the VAR opted not to rule out. And in that respect, it was pretty mystifying to once again see such a potent Liverpool side pitch up at Old Trafford and deliver another meek, tepid display. It's hard to point your finger at it. Is it mental? It's difficult to know, but it's obvious this fixture has historically been tight and scrappy. But they missed a huge opportunity at Old Trafford last season, and it was the same again on Sunday. Obviously, they still boast a 6-point lead over Manchester City at the top of the table. They're in very, very good health. But this was probably as poor as Jurgen Klopp's side have played since Napoli away last season, and the first points they've dropped in the Premier League since early March.
So, 1-1 in the end, Sam. Was this ultimately a fair result?
Yeah, I think so. I think United did better than many people expected, and Liverpool did considerably worse than most people expected. One thing I'm not entirely convinced by is the sort of the chain of argument now that this could be a turning point or it was a great moment for Solskjaer. I mean, I don't think we learned a huge amount new about Man United here. Their defence is actually quite good. Their problems this season have been going forward, the lack of creativity, the lack of any sort of attacking structure, as we've discussed on this podcast before. So playing in a way they did against Liverpool by sitting deep and counter-attacking is something we knew they could do, and they defended very well, which we knew they could do. They've got one of the best defensive records in the league still. So the questions that have been aimed at Solskjaer about creativity and everything that comes with being Man United and playing against smaller teams will not go away based on this evidence. For example, Dan James looked great because he had space to run into because Liverpool pushed up higher. Against Newcastle, Dan James looked terrible because they sat deep and he had no space to run into. So there are issues going on which this match will not have resolved, but at the same time, they were more resolute perhaps than most people would have expected, and on that alone that will be seen as a step forward.
It did seem to me like a good performance in the context of what happened before the international break. That defeat at Newcastle was particularly atrocious. They did at least come out with some aggression and intensity, Mina, and they could have won it.
Well, to be honest, I thought that I learned quite a bit, which is one, that Fred is still a good footballer when he tries. That Pereira is rather good in a number 10 position. That Marcus Rashford is still wonderful and still capable of doing some rather astonishingly good things. You know what bothered me about this is if you are capable of doing this, if you are capable of bringing the challenge to Liverpool, fighting for the ball, producing like these wonderful like skills, then why don't you do this day in, day out? Obviously, it becomes a lot harder to motivate the side when you're not playing the likes of Liverpool or Manchester City. It's much harder when it's a poor set of games. But I thought that it was Solskjaer did a very good job on a tactical level. I think that what he looked at, you saw Liverpool, and Liverpool are very good, but they're top. They're top in the sense that their front three are wonderful, their back four are wonderful, but the midfield's always been a bit industrious, and he's just thought, you know what, I'm going to force you to beat us with your quality. And they don't really have that quality in the midfield, and I think that you got to see that again and exposed time and time again. And it's a little bit like with Man City, Liverpool have a fatal flaw in the sense that if you defend against them with a deep block, like Mourinho said, that is going to be a problem for them. And United forced them to show their quality, and they really didn't have that kind of quality, and neither do United, to be frank. But I thought it was a very exciting game, and if you are capable of that. I mean, not exciting game in the sense that
the shock and awe was palpable.
I think that is. You're right. I mean, you're just looking at your reactions made me, reconsider what I just said. I think what was nice is the fact that if you are capable of playing this way, then why have we been watching the most hideous performances against the likes of Newcastle? And this worries me because then they have this run of fixtures in November in which they face Bournemouth, Brighton, Sheffield United, and then Aston Villa. This is Manchester United. Are they going to look at all of this and think, yeah, we're just going to coast through, or are they going to actually do something special?
Yeah, interesting position for them to be in, where it's almost against the smaller teams that they face more questions. What about Liverpool, JJ? It seemed like a very disappointing display from them. What was up with them, did you think?
I think, although Klopp was trying during the week to G them up and say that they have to take Man United really seriously, it'd be a big game, I think a few of them just didn't really turn up. I think Origi had a really poor game, didn't seem quite fired up in the way they should have been. But I also think the way that Man United set up in the first half, most of the second, killed them. Having Wan-Bissaka and Ashley Young as wide midfielders, they weren't wing backs, they were really high, so they were pushed high on to Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, and those are basically Liverpool's playmakers. That's who makes all the chances for them. So because they couldn't get forward and they were having to rush passes forward, that worked. But also they had a block in the middle of midfield, so there was no way to get passes through the middle either. And then the three centre backs they were tight to each of the strikers, so then they couldn't get on the ball either, and they just slowed everything down. I think a lot of Liverpool's approach play, they were looking to try and hit high balls towards where Lindelof is, because we know that he can't deal with aerial balls very well, and that doesn't really create many chances. And I think just Man United kept them really quiet. It's a shame that the changes that Solskjaer made later on in the game, when he changed it to more of a 5-3-2 than a 5-4-1, it meant that Andreas Pereira was moved out from his 10 position to wide right, and he doesn't close down things. He doesn't see danger quite as quickly as some others. And so him and Wan-Bissaka, who's still very young, a bit inexperienced, maybe didn't see danger when they should have done, which is how Robertson crossed in the ball in the final bit for the equaliser. But they just needed that space, Robertson and Alexander-Arnold, and they got it in the final 15 after Solskjaer tweaked it more. He's been too risky. It makes sense to try and block things out, I guess, in the last few minutes of a game, but he also then give them the space they needed.
Just wanted to ask you a question, because obviously the tactic is to break down the fullbacks. Yeah, so sort of like their playmakers, like you said, yeah, Robertson, Trent Alexander. So when you do that and then you defend in an low block, is this the time where Liverpool would have needed sort of a Coutinho or that kind of player?
It's really difficult. United were, like we're saying, United will be better against smaller teams because United want to play in the counter, and you can't play in the counter if you have the ball. So they only had 32% of possession. So they basically, Liverpool fell into the trap and then couldn't get through it. But I mean, there was loads of chances that Liverpool created. I think, and Mane's goal, we won't mention the handballness of it, but that should have been I think that should have been a goal, and that would have been them 1-1, and they probably would have grown into it. And you see,
sorry,
your
as in, if had he not handled it, it should have been a goal.
But
it's accidental handball,
Okay,
isn't it?
right,
I would argue it's accidental, but that happens. But then again, that's Lindelof being left 1v1. And it's also that goal that didn't count was because Young had dropped back to deeper than he should have been from his position in the first place.
But United also had several chances that they didn't take the most.
Yeah, no, I think they were fine, but then you always get chances in the counter because Liverpool have to open up to try and break them down, and you always leave your centre-backs on their own that way. This is how it works. But, I mean, all teams in the world struggle against teams who defend deep. But Man United engaged kind of halfway, and they weren't too deep. They only dropped into a 5 when they had to in certain bits during the game. It's just really well managed until the end.
I've enjoyed the reaction to Van Dijk losing his balance against Marcus Rashford, and everyone on Twitter going, he's human after all, as they always say. And I think Man United fans were crowing about that, which I think is an indication of quite how good Van Dijk is.
Liverpool missing Salah as well. That would have made a big difference.
I think so, because then they can't attack in the same way, and you saw that Mane was drifting inside quite a lot when he should be more to the right. And Origi kept drifting out to the left. He was getting bored, not getting the ball in the middle. And I think Salah just scares you a bit more. So you'd have to think about what you're doing. You probably couldn't have just 3 centre-backs. You want an extra. It's all about getting numbers on them.
When they were sort of whipping in those crosses from so far back, as you sort of mentioned, United sitting deep, and Alexander-Arnold was crossing from like really, really deep in sort of far back from the touchline. I did think, because they've got Firmino up front, who obviously is brilliant, as we know, at dropping in and playmaking and knitting those things together, but they didn't really have an actual option as a proper centre forward.
I know, but then I think with Liverpool, the whole point, Klopp loves counter pressing. The whole point would be you put it in, it gets cleared, and then second ball, like your second phase, is that when you attack and you create the chance that way because the defence is trying to organise where they are, which is something I think Man United are bad at.
I think what you're saying is basically their planning is really good, but sometimes if there's a chink in the armour of planning, you're not entirely sure that they can just reverse it all and play a different type of plan B. It
just felt, and this is something that very rarely I feel watching Liverpool, but it felt like yesterday they could have done with having a big bloke as a striker off the bench.
Yeah, I think
they have in the past had those players and tried to buy those players.
Like Origi, who should only ever come off the bench.
Yeah, and only ever play as a centre forward. He shouldn't be playing on the left wing. He's not a good left winger.
Let's not be too harsh on Origi. Like, the guy did manage the comeback against Barcelona in the Champions League. For me, he's a champion.
Only as good as your last game, Nina. Get him out. Sack him. Let's move on.
Carroll back in, I reckon.
That would be the transfer to end all transfers. Let's move on to a couple of must-win games, or so they seemed, on Saturday morning. The first of which was Spurs, which, of course, they didn't win. They were very fortunate, in fact, to get a draw against Watford. They still look so far, Mina, from their normal levels. Would you be worried if you supported Tottenham?
Yeah, hugely worried, to be honest. I looked at this game and I just thought that if it wasn't for VAR, if it wasn't for Watford being sort of better finishers because they had so many opportunities, then they would have lost this, and quite comprehensively. Maybe I'm a little bit exaggerating on this, but you watch the likes of Deulofeu and Pereira just combining, and Serge Aurier having to come in, which thank God that he did, because most of the time you watch Decore just move from midfield, make these wonderful penetrative runs. No one was tracking him. It just looked like this was a side that was more interested in watching what was happening than actually trying to stop it. They did, of course, have their moments. I thought Dele Alli in particular was very good for them. Maybe he's there to try to prove something. But in general, I thought that the way that Watford played deserved more than what they got, actually. And I'm a little bit worried about Spurs going forward, yeah.
All right, I suppose we're going to have to start the 1-minute VAR timer now as we get into a very, very busy weekend for the video assistant referee. So, Sam, incorrectly displayed no goal after Dele Alli got the equaliser. Crowd in complete disarray. Massive penalty decision against Watford. It is a mess, isn't it? Surely something is going to have to be looked at, maybe not immediately, but at the end of the season, because the way it's been implemented, the way it's been communicated, something's not right.
This felt like a really bad weekend for VAR, our good friend VAR. The penalty decision on Deulofeu with Vertonghen bringing him down. I mean, I don't understand. I know this sounds like a really basic point, but I don't understand how you can look at that and not give a penalty. The whole point of VAR is to correct mistakes made on the pitch, right, by the referee.
And
Not to just back him up no matter what. I just find it baffling.
Yeah, well, it was sort of something that Klopp said, which obviously I know he was saying it because he was like, well, we let games, we let the ball go on or the movement go on because we know that there's VAR. And then VAR's there that's supposed to stop it, to come in and say, okay, well, this is a clear and obvious error.
Right, so if the ref doesn't make a decision thinking that VAR's coming,
then basically he's
then
always
you're getting
right.
the wrong message that the ref's made the decision, which he hasn't yet.
But this was almost like a repetitive foul by Vertonghen. He did like 2 or 3 moves that you're thinking this is a penalty for sure. How could you not overturn that decision?
How are you feeling about it, JJ?
I still like VAR. I think.
Oh, that's it. I'm afraid. So
the subjectivity of it is
no, we're gone.
important,
Stop it. We've
okay.
got to stick to our promise to our loyal listeners. So back on Spurs, we have spoken a lot about their situation, but are we seeing anything to suggest that Poch is going to turn this around? I know he's had a marvellous spell there, but it's been how many years? 4 or 5? It's a long while.
5.5, he keeps saying.
It's understandable that the impetus might be running out a little bit and the situation is getting away from him a bit because so many of the players seem to be thinking about leaving.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've said before how this is a team clearly in need of an overhaul. And I think everyone at the club knows that too. Although Poch did say last week, I was at his press conference last week when he said, I don't want to make any signings or have any departures in January, which I would respectfully say is him just saying that to try and galvanise his team rather than actually believing that, because I think he tried to use the international break as a reset button and he was very sort of deliberately relaxed and charming on last week in his press duties, and he was saying that, or talking about togetherness, and he was joking about how he had joined in training and he was sort of keeping the ball away from the younger lads and that sort of thing, and it was all very
doesn't bode well for them.
Yeah, exactly. It was all very, aren't we a great big family and everyone's happy together and we're pulling in the right direction. I think he used the international break as that moment to reset and sort of change the mood. So for them to then go out and play just as poorly again against the team like Watford, who had such a terrible start to the season, I thought was actually in many ways just as worrying and troubling as some of their other results this season.
I think that's just Spurs reverting to type. I think they've overshot for the last 2-3 years. Players, particularly on XG, I always talk about that, but like Harry Kane just guarantees you goals that you shouldn't normally get. I don't think Dele Alli has really come on since about 2-3 years ago.
Do you think then that a new manager might actually take them on a bit, might improve them a bit, if they have been overachieving under Pochettino, that someone with new ideas that might take the talent that is obviously there and get them to another level?
I mean, it's really difficult. Like, what if Jurgen Klopp went in and then turned them around and galvanised it and made them play the way Liverpool do? He would still need better players to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And it's the end of a cycle.
But that's part
clearly.
of the management, isn't it? Like what Klopp's done so brilliantly at Liverpool is basically tear up the team he inherited. Like that's part of it.
Yeah, he introduced a new style of play. He did it very well, quite quickly. But he finished 8th first year he was there, and then Pochettino is clearly a very talented coach. But it looks like it's the end of a cycle for Spurs. They probably need to get some new players in, but they won't get anyone nearly as good as players like Harry Kane and Eriksen and guys like that. But if they're wanting to go, you don't get the same drive from them, and they'll go to Real Madrid. And Pochettino's probably thinking, well, maybe I should go to Real Madrid when Zidane gets done. And it's not great for them. But
I just feel like, honestly, unless you're going to get like Klopp or Pep Guardiola, you're pretty much got already one of the best already. And he does have a squad that's still got the skeleton from 2015, 2016 with very little changes. I mean, Klopp does have a management that will support him in buying these transformative players that come into the team and change everything from Alisson to Van Dijk. And you look at Vertonghen and Alderweireld and all these types of players and you think, my God, I mean, how can he change it this season? He's not going to go in December and find himself 2 wonderful centre-backs that are ready to be sold at a reasonable price that's going to satisfy Levy.
Yeah.
So there's really very little that he can do to change this other than the fact that you are facing one of the best Liverpool sides probably we've ever seen and one of the best Manchester City sides. So it's like, how far can you go? How can you continue to motivate a side that is worn out, that's been doing the same thing for 4 or 5 years minimum, and that's not being regenerated? You went through a transfer market without anything, now a transfer market that was also below expectations. I just feel like there just comes a time where who are you going to bring in that's going to galvanise them, or at least do something for the long term rather than just for a one term.
And how are you going to pay for them?
Yeah.
Unless you flog your best players that you already have.
And also, when he does buy players, he doesn't put them in the team. He just I don't know how long he needs them to integrate and get ready to play in the Premier League, but they take forever to get in the first team. And I don't understand what the thinking behind it is, whether he actually want in the first place.
Part of it is fitness. He's very demanding. In many ways, according to some people, he's too demanding.
Well, maybe
part of the problem.
I think I think it's a weirdly European thing, to be honest.
Is it?
Yeah, because I always find it quite shocking when new players do go into the team straight away. I prefer that they have sort of like a 2-3 month,
incubation period.
Yeah.
Lucas Moura took at least 6 months, didn't he? He came in January and didn't play properly until the start of the next season.
I still don't even think of him as a Spurs player yet.
He's still a fresh face, despite being there for like 2 years.
That's very much your problem, JJ. The other must-win game was Everton, who hosted West Ham on Saturday lunchtime, and they did it. They got it over the line. They won 7 of their last 9 at home. And the next 4 games of Brighton, Watford, Spurs, Southampton all feel, like they could get a decent amount out of those. They're not too bad, are they, JJ? I mean, you've said all along they're the most medium team in the league. We haven't changed our opinion too much about Everton.
No, I think Everton and West Ham could have played this. They could play this game every day for the next 2 weeks, and it would have a different result every single time. It's just down to individual mistakes. They did make a big change. He took Sigurdsson was dropped for this one and put Iwobi in. I mean, Sigurdsson scored an absolute pinger at the end, but it looks like Silva is maybe changing things up a wee bit. I don't think just to try and save himself, just because things aren't quite flowing for Everton. But they're not. Them and West Ham, I'd say, are pretty even. It's just they've won this one. I'd imagine West Ham will win the next one.
But we say, Everton are so medium, but they shouldn't be. Look at what they spent on that squad. Look at the people in that team. That shouldn't be a medium team. They should be so much better than they are. And
it's nuts, isn't it?
This was a good win, and they needed it. And Marco Silva in particular needed it. But you still have to say they've underperformed considerably.
Tom Davies is back in as well.
Yeah,
he's not played for ages.
He was very good as well.
Like his potential kind of been or his growth had been stunted, and he wasn't going to get into the team again. But he was very good that game. Yeah.
So his average spell, Marco Silva at a club, the ones that he has lasted for more than a few seconds, is around 53 games. And this was the 53rd game. Oh. So I thought, what about if he loses this one? 5th consecutive defeat and he's out. But I thought there was at least the one thing that I can say for him is at least he let his players play with a level of freedom, happiness that you wouldn't have seen from a side under so much pressure. But I do think this is also West Ham sort of throwing it away, not even trying. Yeah,
Pellegrini said at half-time he would have swapped all 11 players if he could have done. I'd quite like that to be an option. Once a year, you get to play your joker and
like
just
a wild card in fantasy. Yeah,
that would be brilliant. Can we make that happen?
I think we can certainly.
Let's start a campaign.
Yeah, let's do it now.
Okay.
They've lost 3 out of the last 4 games and draw 1 away to Bournemouth since beating Man U. And they beat Man U, and I remember myself coming in here and saying, look, they've got all the ingredients there to really push on for a European place, as long as they're consistent and don't screw up against lower teams. And they've instantly gone and screwed up against all the lower teams again. What's going to trigger this sort of change that they need, which is consistency? And I don't really know the answer.
That's the toughest thing, isn't it?
Do you think West Ham can do it, that Fabianski?
It doesn't help.
I'm really worried about them in that way. Anyway. Oh, and also, Ajeti, that guy that they brought on, is that how you say his name?
He's a bit of a who, isn't he?
No, but it's just a bit like he had 3 touches in 17 minutes, and you're like, I don't know whether this was a really good decision to sell to Chicharito, Anyway.
Let's move on to the rest of the Premier League now. It was a fairly straightforward win for Manchester City in a horrible kit with a beautiful second goal, Sam. Looked like it could have been many more than 2-0 for them at Palace. How positive a sign was it for them that they did beat Palace quite comfortably, a team that's given them problems in the recent past?
They did have problems towards the end. They needed Edison to make 2 really good saves, particularly one from Benteke, which was extraordinary.
Outrageous.
Yeah, that was brilliant. And Palace, I think, actually did a decent job for the first half an hour. Had 10 minutes where they got blitzed, conceded 2 goals in 2 minutes, and that was pretty much that. But I didn't look at City and think, they're back to their best here. I was still they looked a bit wobbly at the back, and there was a lot of praise afterwards for Fernandinho and Rodri playing as centre-backs, and everyone sort of saying, they're so good at bringing the ball into midfield. Well, yes, they would be. They are midfielders, but they weren't so good. I thought at stages they looked quite nervous together, and they looked a bit troubled by Zaha at points, not massively. Don't get me wrong, but at points. So I wasn't convinced it was them, flying again. But yeah, it was a good win. The goal scored by Silva from Sterling's little scoop was really, really nice. That was one of the goals of the weekend for sure. And Gabriel Jesus scores again. I think there's an argument, and I don't want to make it too strongly because it's almost like sacrilegious, but there's an argument, I think, to say that it's time Jesus became number one centre forward over Aguero. No.
That selfish desire to not pass to Kevin De Bruyne when he was in a much better position explains to you exactly why he shouldn't be number one.
Jesus
in defence of him, I've seen Aguero do that 1,000 times as well.
Yeah, but because Aguero has a better chance of actually scoring it if he does decide to be selfish.
I don't know, no, I don't think so. I think they have the same chance of scoring, yeah.
Would that have mattered as... My defence from there would be, well, it was... They were up at that point. Yeah, they were 2-0 up, so...
Yes, it matters.
You get to be a bit more selfish when you're 2-0 up because it's not,
It matters. Carlo Ancelotti lost his job because Bale was selfish. So no, this matters.
You also get individual players will have their oon tasks for a game. So that Pep will be saying that you should get 2 goals here today.
It'll be on a goal bonus as well.
Well, yeah, if you forget the money stuff, I'm surely he's been told you need to get 15 goals this season. If you're going to keep Aguero at the team, you need to be getting 10 out of the next 12 games, that sort of stuff. So he doesn't hit his targets, he knows he's out of the team. Also, maybe I wonder, because Aguero's a little bit older, he might just be trying to keep him fresh for Champions League games more because you want that experience in that games.
But I do feel like Guardiola cares more about how you play in the final third as opposed to getting the goal. So if there's anything in the contract, it's how many you may have assisted or how many
It's not in the contract, it's just individual aims.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like Aguero has tried to change his game. Gabriel Jesus also has. So okay, I don't know.
Surely it'll be more sophisticated than that at City. It'll be XG targets, not goal targets.
I heard about us talking to someone in the office this morning about expected threat. The new measure coming out.
Yes,
please. You're going to have to be all over that.
I bet JJ's got a massive expected threat.
There's an expected threat that JJ's going to learn what that phrase means before the end of the season.
Absolutely.
Are we just a little bit upset that there was 2 centre-backs who weren't centre-backs? And don't you just feel that Palace should have perhaps tried a little bit more, inject a little bit more power? I thought that they were very scared, the centre-backs, when Benteke came on. And I'm not saying, start Benteke. I know that he hasn't been exactly, the guy that's been firing from all cylinders. But, he scored against San Marino.
He's back.
So it's solid. We got 6.
Let's
9. It was 9-0.
Let's talk about Benteke because he was a fantastic striker for a little while. He was brilliant at Villa. He was all right at Liverpool. He started pretty well for Palace. How do you go from being really quite a good striker to a bit of a joke? He's not scored now for so long.
It's just confidence.
I think so.
It's just that, and you can see it. It affects so many people in different ways. But if you're an elite athlete, elite footballer, and part of what makes you so good is that you believe you're better than everyone else. You believe you're going to win this header. You believe you're going to score these goals. Not even that you believe. You just think. You just know. You just know that's going to happen. But then you start to see the mechanics of it. It's not muscle memory anymore. You're trying to make things happen that you know used to, and so it doesn't happen. Then you get even more down. You don't trust yourself. People stop looking for you because they don't think you're going to get the ball. Again, if they played Benteke from the start and they were hitting balls into him, they would have just given possession up more and had more counter-attacks. I think that's probably why they didn't do it from the very start.
Yeah.
But, what's he going to do? I mean, I feel it's really sad what happens to strikers like that because clearly he has all the he's all the physical attributes to be a really good striker, like a penalty box poacher, all these bits, but.
I thought also if they just have a bit like if he gets more minutes, but not without the pressure of thinking that Jordan Ayew just ready to take on his position. And I just felt sorry for him because he can't get the minutes, but at the same time you're thinking to yourself, it's a little like when you need to go to sleep and you think, I've only got 6 hours left, and then I've only got 5 hours, and you've got so much pressure on yourself to try to sleep that you don't end up sleeping at all. I kind of feel like that's the way he feels right now. He's just trying to sleep.
I wrote a piece about this a few weeks ago and I spoke to a sports psychologist about what actually happened, because what I find most striking about Benteke is that when he was good for Villa, he was so physically powerful and he would literally bully defenders the whole time, and now he doesn't seem to do that at all. And you don't lose physical strength. And the psychologist was telling me that lack of confidence will physically make you feel weaker and it will make you feel slower, and it actually has a knock-on effect to your physical performance. So it's all in your head, but it actually knocks on, and Benteke will feel less powerful than he did when he was playing for Aston Villa.
That is dead interesting, because I was speaking to the Aberdeen manager about Sam Cosgrove, who's scored something like, I think it's 34 goals in 43 games at Aberdeen. He was absolutely nothing before he came. I mean, I would go as far as to say he's one of the worst strikers I've ever seen play at Pittodrie. But I just didn't get it. The ball would bounce off his feet and he couldn't do anything. I don't want to be too harsh on the guy because I really like him. I think he's amazing.
Late for that, JJ.
I really like him after I just ruined him.
He was nothing. He was a blob.
He wasn't loved throughout the Aberdeen crowd when he first came on the scene, but now he is one of the like he'll play in the Championship soon. He'll be in the Championship for quite a bit of money. And McInnes was saying the thing about Cosgrove was that when he came, he was quite wee. Like he's a tall guy. He's quite, he's not stocky, but he just didn't have much power to him. And the more they got him in the gym, the more he felt good about how he looks. And now he feels good, like confident about the way he looks. Like with his shirt off, he looks really good now. He looks hot. And that's when he goes on the pitch, he's like, I'm sexy, I'm going to score some goals. And I wonder if that might be, because that just flows through you. Do you feel like good like that?
Ronaldo has that.
So you want a makeover, basically. You think a makeover makes a difference.
I think if I just spend some more time in the gym, maybe we'll lose 11-4.
I love it.
If you
Literally sexy football.
If you feel, and this is probably not relevant to Premier League football, but if you feel like strong and pumped up,
Are we about to get into audio Tinder
I'm going to
club
reveal
here?
something I've never revealed.
Is this why you're doing push-ups
On the
outside the podcast room?
I do push-ups before I play football sometimes. Is
that right?
You do a few because you want to feel like the blood's flowing. You feel a
I
bit
think you're
pumped
going to say
up.
before
Wait,
a game.
it feels like there's going to be a bigger revelation here, Sam. What were you going to
No,
say?
that was the push-ups
Oh,
thing.
that's rubbish.
Why doesn't he just...
If he's feeling buff and pumped up, he probably thinks, yeah, bring it on. But if you're feeling a bit like weedy and I've not been gym for a few days, then you're not gonna
Get on the phone to Benteke, get him on the
Why
push-ups.
not just hire
Exactly.
a psychologist? Why don't you just hire a guy who'll help you push forward?
And they all do.
budgets in Aberdeen are not good.
No.
No, I mean,
Benteke will have his own one. I'd imagine he'll be
Oh, they've
keeping
tried all
people
that.
like
Hodgson said that we've tried. Hodgson said a few weeks ago, like, oh, we've tried everything.
Oh, really?
But now we're trying the new one, which is basically dropping him.
Oh, that's really sad.
That would really help.
Stop.
How would you motivate Christian Benteke, podcast fans? Send us an email, afcpodcast@telegraph.co.uk. Let's talk about Aston Villa versus Brighton and Hove Albion. This was a great game. 44 attempts on goal in total. It's good to see this sort of football, JJ, from clubs like Villa and Brighton. I thought they'd be well within their rights to set up very defensively and play for a draw and grind, or just sort of grind it out. But they were both going for it. Did you enjoy this one?
Yeah, I like these sorts of games. I know it's like Mina's nightmare, isn't it? Having two teams go at each other. I think it's great, and these games, it's early enough in the season, and they've both done well enough so far that they can afford to the cliche, give it a go. But I mean, Villa took till the very last minute just to score their winner. Jack Grealish was superb throughout. He's turns out actually a lot better than I thought he was. He is actually a very talented player. I think Brighton, they seem to start well under Potter, and now they're not getting the results. And
Come on, they beat Spurs. And they were playing with 10 men. So I love that everyone goes on about how wonderful Villa is. They're playing against 10 men. And it's a poor squad, you know?
Yeah.
I think
it was a good game.
Potter's
Yes.
doing a good job, I think.
I think so too, yeah.
It says 5 Brighton players on my notes, 1 Grealish and bang. That's all I noted about the game.
The thing with Potter, like, is no matter how the football's good to watch, and I think he's great because he's done good things before, and I think he'd be a great manager for most of the Premier League. But if they're not getting results in February, Brighton are going to be going, well, we're going to get relegated, and they'll chop him, and then you just...
I'm not sure they will. I'm not sure.
I hope
think
not.
Dan Ashworth.
I've seen that movie so many times before, though, right? Like,
Yeah, I think the way they've tried to sort of change the mentality and philosophy of the club and bring in young players, and they've got a great academy system there. It's time to start mining it, really. And Dan Ashworth's there with a long-term goal in mind, and I think there's enough evidence so far to think that they'd probably trust Potter to get them out of it. I don't think they're going to pull the trigger.
Even if they fall, you feel like he'll be the man who'll take charge of it and try to get them.
I mean, obviously, if they get like spanked and get relegated by a mile, then he'll go. But I think Brighton want to give him quite a lot of time, and they'll be more willing to do that than most clubs at this point. Just on Grealish and muscle, have you seen how different he looks physically to when he played Premier League before? I know he was obviously a lot younger then, a teenager then.
Yeah,
but like,
he's filled out. Yeah.
He's properly filled out, and his calves, I think, are the biggest calves in the Premier League right now, would be my suggestion. He's enormous, and he's brilliant, and he should be playing for England, I think, hopefully at the next international break.
Okay, let's just hold on, and you know, I don't want to put too much pressure on this. Like on this
Grealish,
player,
he can handle it.
On Mason Mount, we say this, but we don't know. I feel like sometimes they get worn out, and again, like we have to see how he does and how he progresses against opponents that are not Brighton and down to 10 men, you know, and then we can. It's my pet peeve about how we. You know,
People get into international teams too quickly.
I don't know, just slowly. Like there's nothing like rushing them. There's so many good players right now. Mason Mount, Jack Grealish. There's Maddison, exactly. Phil Foden, who might never get a minute, but you never know.
It's all right, Mina, you can say it. Football's coming home. Let's just quickly talk about the one Premier League game we've got on Monday night. It's Sheffield United hosting Arsenal. This looks pretty banana skinny for Arsenal. Sam, what's going to happen at Bramall Lane?
I'm on my way up after this.
Lovely.
We need to
Great
finish
ground.
on time, yeah. I've never been.
What a treat.
I need to get my key ring, add
What
that
a
to my
treat.
collection. Yeah, it's a bit odd one, this, because Sheffield United have got a good system and a good sort of structure, and they've got a solid midfield, which are all the things, funnily enough, that Arsenal don't have. But Arsenal have really good strikers, which is one of the things Sheffield United doesn't have. So for me, it comes down to basically individual class of Aubameyang and Lacazette should be back versus a very well-drilled system and a team that's a very good unit. So it should be quite an interesting matchup. I think if I was to bet on it, I'd probably put 1 or 2-0 Arsenal just because of that quality. But Sheffield United are a good team, and they've not lost any game by more than 1 goal this season. So it will certainly be close. It will not be a walkover at all.
Unfortunately, we have to discuss racism in football again after a extremely trying week for fans of progress and 2019 being what it should be. Started with the nonsense in Bulgaria for England on Monday, and then Haringey Borough walking off at home in the FA Cup with the Ovals fans abusing their goalkeeper in particular. Is that the right solution at this point, Mina, taking the players off?
It's very difficult to tell people what they should do at this moment, because I think that, the sort of like this was discussed at Bulgaria when Southgate and the team were saying that they'll walk off if there's anything's aimed at them, and they decided to stick by the UEFA 3-prong protocol. But it's really hard to tell players, you have to listen to it. This announcement's going to come on, and then we're going to stop it for a few minutes for another announcement while you'll continue to be abused, and you have to just sort of deal with it. It's up to what you feel. And sometimes it does take a protest to change the laws and to make people realize things. And you have to do what you think is best. And I don't think we can really be there to judge.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was a pretty familiar story over the weekend. Hearts were looked at for potential abuse of Alfredo Morelos of Rangers. Bristol City fans being investigated too. Is this a result of there being more reporting at games, Sam, more awareness of the topic, or is it a sign that everything is just going to pot?
It's really tricky and difficult, and it's difficult to sometimes articulate this in the way you want to. So if I do it clumsily, then I apologise. But obviously, the increase in reporting and attention given to these issues is a good thing. That it's important that we don't accept this as a media and as fans in stadiums. But I also worry whether the attention given to it sometimes actually puts it further forward in the minds of the idiots who actually do these things and the racists. And you look at Bulgaria and how much discussion there was before the match about racism, and then you look at the response of those black-shirted Nazis saluting Bulgaria fans who were very clearly potentially giving the middle finger up to the system, saying, "You've told us, not to do it, etc. So now we're going to do it more."
Holding up T-shirts which are, protesting the UEFA initiative.
Exactly. So you look at that and think, when a racist bigot sees Raheem Sterling, does he now actually think, does he now feel more inclined to racially abuse him and, stick one up to the man because of the attention that's come from it than he did before? I don't know whether that's true or not. I just wonder whether it seems to be that, as we know, the problem's getting worse, and last year there were more incidents of it than before, and it seems to be getting worse and worse. And I just wonder whether, not that I know a solution to this, because I think we need to keep calling it out, absolutely, but I do wonder whether the correlation sort of goes hand in hand with increased interest in it and then increased idiocy around it from people who are more self-conscious of it.
Can I just say something that's such an interesting thing that you're talking about, because in Italy, what's been happening recently is obviously if there is any racist abuse, then the club is fined and the club goes through all these sanctions or whatever it is. And what certain presidents and owners have come out and said is we're being held to ransom by these guys, by the ultras who'll come up to us and say, we want this amount of tickets, we want this type of merchandise, we want this all for free. You don't give us what we want, and we'll say a few racist things, and then you're banned, and then you make even less money. So Juventus have been under sort of threat, and Agnelli is now cooperating with the authorities, and he came out and called them out on it. And he said, we've been living under this terror in the sense that the ultras keep threatening us that they'll do all these things. And And then it begs the question, are they doing this to get the power to run sort of their shady dealings and then think, well, you're going to get into so much, problems like Bulgaria did. Obviously, all that happened afterwards for them. We'll put you in all of this mess, or just give us what we want and then we won't say anything. We'll just happily watch the game. And it's kind of putting people as well.
Weaponizing it.
Yeah, weaponizing something, exactly.
Let's leave that depressing subject behind and listen to some lovely music. Yes, it's time for a song for Europe. Mina, the Clasico's off because of the protests in Barcelona. Is this the right call?
I guess it has to be, right? Because, considering the situation that's going on in Catalonia right now, if you don't know this, then it's following the jailing of 9 Catalan political leaders for the part that they played in staging an illegal referendum and the failed bid for independence. So what happens from now and when they will play the Clasico will be decided today. Both clubs want it to be played, I think, on the 18th of December. It has to be played before the first set of fixtures are played, the first half. So, it comes at a good time when you consider the fact that Dembele wouldn't be there for Barcelona and Real Madrid. I'm not entirely sure if any player would be available because they're just going through such an injury crisis. So it's different. People wanted different things, but both clubs didn't want to have it at the Bernabeu, which is what the league wanted. So I guess it's a good, as long as they're happy with it.
Yeah, Real Madrid lost their unbeaten start to Mallorca. What happened there? Was it the injury crisis that caught up with them?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no Luka Modric, Eden Hazard, Toni Kroos, Gareth Bale. Varane and Carvajal were rested because they obviously got a Champions League game midweek. They never obviously brought in the likes of Paul Pogba or Van de Beek, so they're lacking in central midfielders, and you can't really leave Casemiro alone with James Rodriguez and Isco. Also, no one really tends to help him do his job at the back there. So, and when you're forcing James to go deep and try to get the ball as well, there's not enough. He's not really fresh when he does make those runs into midfield, which is where he's at his best. When you consider the fact that Odriozola also got sent off, defense wasn't really doing its job, you sort of understand what's happening there, but you're talking about stripping the club of all its champions. So, yes, it's going to come up with a really weird result.
What about Bayern Munich, Mina? Disappointing result for them, drawing 2-2 with Augsburg. Why have they started slowly? Happened last year, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that might be a little bit controversial, but I just feel like the quality of the Bundesliga has gone down last season and this season. And Niko Kovac is not the right coach. I think that there's like a little bit of a vacuum of great talent in the Bundesliga right now. There's a lot of potential, but not necessarily proven talent. Bayern have only won 4 out of 8 games, and this was not a very good game, obviously, because for many reasons. Süle's out with an ACL injury now, and I don't think Coutinho should have played, considering he's just come back from Singapore, but, I'm not Niko Kovac. But you just look at this sort of league table, and you look at Borussia Mönchengladbach are at the top. This is a side that lost 4-0 in the Europa League against a team called Wolfsberger. It took me a while to figure out where Wolfsberger is because it's in Austria. And 4-0, and you think, it's the Europa League. They probably played their second string. No, they played their starting lineup, and they're top of the league right now, Dortmund, I don't know what's going on with them because they really love the 2-2 sort of results, and they've got 3 in a row. They finally managed to change that this weekend, but you look at Bayer Leverkusen, and they played Lokomotiv Moscow, and they had 79% possession and couldn't score a goal. They had 55% possession against Juventus and couldn't even get a shot on target. So I just feel like right now it's not quality football, and this is the year, if ever there was one, to take away that challenge or to bring that challenge to Bayern Munich, because they are also poor. And I know people will point to Spurs, but I'm sorry, Brighton managed to beat Spurs at the moment. Watford should have beaten them. So this isn't a way to judge them, but there is that vacuum, and I do think that had Lucien Favre and his Borussia Dortmund been a little bit better, they could have really won this.
Jadon Sancho suspended this weekend, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, for coming home late.
Turning up late and fined. Not good.
England players misbehaving, whatever country they're playing football in. Meanwhile, in Italy, 87-year-old Gianluigi Buffon put in a great performance for Juve as they got past Bologna. But surely the game of the weekend was Sassuolo 3, Internazionale 4. And yes, that was a Phil Collins reference. What happened there, Mina? Fantastic game.
It was a fantastic game. I think this is the kind of games that you do see in Italy after international break. Sassuolo have just lost their president, owner, the man who made them, in Giorgio Squinzi, and he died at, I think he's 74. And it's very sad for them. So they're going through a period of mourning right now. And I think that they wanted to do something special. It's a big game, obviously, against Antonio Conte's Inter. And they did do very special because after 70 minutes, Inter, who did score 4 goals, 2 with Lautaro Martinez and a brace for Lukaku as well, they just had a blackout. And Sassuolo managed to really pin them back, not allow them to counterattack, and then just went for it and got 3 goals, made it really nervy towards the end. And it was so exciting because I do think Serie A is a lot of fun.
Yeah, better than Germany, for sure. Let's finish up with a question we put to our friends on social media, which was as follows. The referee is yet to consult the VAR pitchside screens in any incident in the Premier League so far this season. How would you incentivise referees to go and take a look? Ross Paul on Twitter took this pretty seriously and simply said, make it mandatory for penalty decisions. How about you, JJ?
I think you get someone that they don't trust that much to be in the VR, like their son or something, to be in the VAR room. So what is it?
I love that they don't trust
their
their
penalty,
son.
Dad. I think it's a penalty. It's like,
I have to check this one.
I'll have to check. Yeah.
Beat that, Sam.
How do you get anyone in football to do anything? You commercially incentivise it. So I'm thinking you have to make them wear a certain type of glasses to look at the video. So then you can get someone like Specsavers to sponsor them. There's nothing in it for referees. Where's they've got no boot deals, they've got no kit deals.
So you're bribing them?
No. I'm giving them
their
commercial opportunities. Maybe you could put a chair by the screen, a chair sponsored by a furniture outlet, so you could have like a Habitat deal with the referee, and then he could go on their adverts and be like, commercially.
Have you been bribed by Habitat and Specsavers?
other what furniture outlets are available.
And opticians. This is fantastic, Sam. I can't believe the Premier League went from that no mark from The Guardian. They could have had you in charge.
No, I know, mental. But you just commercially incentivise them because footballers do it. Footballers, Nicholas Bentner wears Paddy Power pants.
Yeah.
Other, places.
He just likes them. He doesn't always show them. He just really enjoyed the fit of them when he did it commercially that one time.
But referees get none of this. What watch does Martin Atkinson wear?
Yeah.
You don't know, do you?
I don't.
But he should be able to cash in on that and say, I'm wearing a Rolex because it's accurate.
Nina, what have you got?
I guess the power of the people, right? Just, sort of get the crowd to do a mass protest.
Ask the audience, like in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Just get them to clap,
them
like
voting.
sort of a soft clap, like, come on, check it, that kind of stuff. And I feel like the power of the people, which forces them sometimes to make silly decisions when it comes to red cards and stuff, might actually force them to go over it.
I wonder if they copied what they do in rugby, which I really enjoyed watching this World Cup, where you can, they do it all the time, but you hear clearly the conversation that they're having between them, so you know what's going on. So then there's no way to hide behind what's happened. You've heard what the VAR has said to them, and they've got to reply back to you. So then if they think, I'm going to look stupid here when this comes out, they might as well just go and check it.
The issue is that I think the
Players would
world
swear
of
around
football
them.
is slightly less articulate than the world of rugby.
Very few players addressing the referee as sir in football.
Suddenly you've got a bunch of lads running in and saying things that you don't want being broadcast at 1:30
Well,
on
it would
Saturday
create-
afternoon.
Not like Dembele saying you're bad.
Yeah, you are very bad.
It will create job opportunities for people to push the bleep button.
That's true.
I'm creating employment with my ideas as well.
In these uncertain times, we need more of those opportunities.
JJ for Prime Minister.
Please, bull in.
That's your lot for this week. You can contact me on Twitter if you'd like to before next Monday's episode. It's at Tom with an H Gibbs. And why not send us an email? afcpodcast@telegraph.co.uk is the address. We'll read out the very best of what you send us. Don't forget to subscribe to Audio Football Club. You can get it every week by looking for Audio Football Club wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Joel Grove on the buttons, and thanks to you for your company. I'll talk to you again soon.